And we are on the air. We are live for the Bloody Elbow Vivisection. This week we are breaking down World Series of Fighting 14, Ford versus Shields. And it's in a week that's pretty otherwise devoid of MMA action, so we're talking about this. This is our MMA action of the weekend. I'm joined by Victor Rodriguez, who appears to be living firmly in the past with the lovely pride of his shirt. So yeah, Vic, how you doing?
Oh man, I'm doing wonderful. I'm not in the past. I'm just celebrating, just a little something that brought me into MMA fandom. But hey, we're already here. We're doing this. Let's talk violence.
Totally got to talk the violence and got to talk about the a World Series of Fighting card that is maybe not the best thing in the world, but is not bad. It's not a terrible
Hmm.
card,
It
and
certainly seems. I'm sorry.
oh, and it's coming on the heels of some big weird news for the promotion as a whole. This is odd times for World Series of Fighting.
Yeah, that's one way to put it. Yeah, they just lost their former welterweight champion. I don't know. The news was that they'd signed him to a new three-fight contract, and then that went up in smoke, and suddenly he's in the UFC, which I don't know what that means or how these contracts are done or how I guess there was some sort of matching period that wasn't talked about. But, well, he's gone, and they still have a degree of, they're still kind of, their strongest division is still welterweight, I guess you could argue. So they're not in terrible shape with losing Berkman. Um, it just makes you wonder pretty much what we've talked about before. Like, yeah, I don't think too many of these guys really plan on fighting in World Series of Fighting and actually staying there. I think it's pretty much either the regional guys trying to get some action in and then everyone else trying to jump over to the UFC.
Yeah, it definitely does not look anymore like a promotion that is long for this world, unfortunately. Or, well, depending on how you view World Series of Fighting as a business model at this point, unfortunately or fortunately. Um, the I mean, because it's not just Josh Berkman, it's Georgie Karkanyan too, whose contract I think was
Yeah.
up, but who immediately jumped ship to Bellator at the completion of his contract.
Yeah. No, and I don't really know. Again, you have to ask yourself, what is this promotion? What is their purpose exactly? Is it just a way to make money? Or are they sort of like Bellator, like they'll be content to make their own little thing and sort of exist as their own entity and not be anybody's springboard? It doesn't seem to be the case, but at the same time, they're not like RFA or like, say, Titan Fight, where they're more definitely smaller shows. They seem to be going with some of the bigger talent up top and then filling out the rest of the card with more lesser known names and regional talent. I'm not really sure what their whole point is of existing. I don't know how much longer they can keep doing this because unlike Bellator, Bellator has a major global multimedia conglomerate backing them. They just have one person financing a World Series of Fighting right now, and I don't know how much more money Sig Rogic is willing to burn on these guys.
Yeah, it does. I mean, because they don't really have. It's from from what I know of it, they don't really have anything approximating a TV deal. They're buying time on NBC, which is certainly it's almost the opposite of getting money from being on TV. In fact, is you're spending money to be on TV, and
Yeah.
they don't have, I mean, they have a casino magnate backing them, and it's sort of like that, it's like that idea, I think, the idea that the UFC had early on, where the Fertitta brothers were spending a whole bunch of money to get the UFC up and running and get them financially stable, but they were doing that through pay-per-view. Like, they had a very real bounce back every event they put on. they were trying, had a very real way to generate revenue. World Series of Fighting ticket sales. I mean, where's the revenue coming from in World Series of Fighting? Who's putting money into their pockets? Nobody. Okay, yeah. I mean, that's I think the your silence is damning, unfortunately.
Well, your internet just took a massive shit on that. So I mean,
Oh,
but I got your major point there regarding that. That's okay. It doesn't seem to me. You have to look at it though from the point of view of, okay, the Fertittas came in, bought the UFC, and they've brought.
okay. We appear to be experiencing some problems here. Apparently, we've lost Victor. Hopefully, he'll jump back in here in a minute. In the meantime, just to go over some World Series of, some points with World Series of Fighting here. We know, that there have been some complaints that they haven't been bringing in. Hey, you're back. They haven't been bringing
Yay, I'm
in
back.
talent, or they haven't been bringing in revenue, and that fighters have been having trouble getting their contracts fulfilled properly. They're not making enough money to pay guys the way they've promised them. So while they're putting on a lot of shows, and they are putting on a lot of shows, they're putting on like one a month or two a month even. Their best stars are often aren't on them or are forced to take shorter notice fights for less money because World Series of Fighting can't pay them what they had
Hmm.
promised initially.
Yeah, well, you look at this card alone, and you look at how much more complete it seems compared to the last card, and definitely compared to the one before it, which was the main event of Palomino versus Gonzalez, which we did one of these previews for. And it's really strange how, like, okay, well, you can find fights for these guys and for padding the card with regional talent, but you're telling me you can't get Jacob Volkman or something here? You can't throw him a bone? I mean, something has to give at some point. So if I were a fighter, I'd be more than just a little concerned. And the picture doesn't. I just don't think that. And also the court of public opinion, they're not really. They don't seem to be garnering as much interest. I don't know what their ratings are like, but I don't really think it's been as major as an impact as when they started. Um,
Or
you
even
mentioned that they started with. Yeah, I'm sorry.
so, no, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
You were saying?
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. No, I was just saying you'd mentioned you mentioned the time buys before and how they were spending money to get on TV, and I mean they have some sort of short-term deal with NBC. I don't know how long that's going to really last or what they do from there on in once it expires.
Yeah, it's definitely. I don't see a big future plan for them. And you mentioned Jacob Volkman, but or you like they have Shaman Moraes, who's one of the best bantamweight prospects in the world, easily, and
Yeah.
he's been signed with them for months now, and
Yeah.
there's no planned debut for him.
No,
You know?
no, they don't. No, and it makes you wonder what exactly they're planning on doing. This isn't the Fertitas and Dana White that had this crazy drive to
Yeah.
push it and make it number one and do all this other stuff. I mean, there's a very different motivation, and there's a very sort of their whole way of doing things is just so odd now. I mean, you probably think the most fun event they had so far was probably the one where Ray Sefo, the company president, fought Dave Huckabee. Like that's probably one of the most fun moments that they were able to give us because of the holy shit factor and how it ended. I don't really see anything like that on the horizon right now. Even with Polaris fighting John Fitch now in December, I don't really.
Well, I
I don't
mean,
know. It's kind of hard to get worked up for
there's serious doubts that Balharis Fitch fight even happens.
that.
I mean, that's one of those things you got to look at that and say, is that fight even gonna happen? And maybe even the event happens, but it doesn't feel like as that event closes in that they're gonna if they can make it to the date. I wonder whether that card will remain intact. Maybe it will. I mean, certainly seem to have made it to this card with Jake Shields, but partially too, I wonder if sort of I know they went through this phase where they were buying up all these sort of regional properties in order to make a true World Series of Fighting and have this global brand, of which the first part of it was World Series of Fighting Canada. And so I do almost wonder if like the reason this card is solid and appears to we've got actually gotten to it is because it's not under the same financial constraints as the Las Vegas based World Series of Fighting.
Well, I have to wonder how that global expansion is going to take place, considering that the only other country outside of the U.S. and Canada that they have a World Series of Fighting thing going on as sort of like a sub promotion of sorts is Nicaragua, which I mean, I don't know how rabid the fan base is there, and it just doesn't seem very feasible to me. And also, you have to remember, we talked about this off air last time that we'd forgotten the last event where Marlon Moraes fought Cody Bollinger. It ended up being that was supposed to be the card where they were making their debut in Japan. That
Yeah,
never happened. And how were they going to go to Japan with that talent? Like, there's no Japanese fighters on, and I don't think the Japanese audience. What is an average Japanese fan? Do they know what World Series of Fighting is? I just I don't get it. These are some really odd decisions that they're making.
yeah, there's definitely it feels like the wheels are starting to come off and every World Series of Fighting card is going to we're sort of going to be end up discussing it in hushed tones as it comes up. You don't want to like talk about it too loud for fear that it breaks or that we jinx it and spoil the magic. Because
Mm,
it has to be said, as we should actually get to talking about this card a bit, that this should be a fun fight card.
yeah,
From
this is true.
on the surface, there's actually a lot to be interested in going on this card, and it should be fun to watch. But it does feel like kind of a miracle right now that that World Series of Fighting is even able to put it on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much longer this is supposed to be. Maybe this will last another 3, 4, maybe even 5 years. I'm not privy to any of their financial info or anything like that, but I mean, the current way of doing things seems untenable as far as the logic and what we're used to in mixed martial arts and how promotions are run. So I don't know. This whole thing is just it's every event they put on, you still look at it, you go, yeah, I still don't know what this is. I still don't know where they're going with this. It looks like fun, and I'll certainly be watching this one, which is more than I can say for like the last one or the one they're putting on in November, where the last event they were up against a Mayweather card and a UFC event. November 15th, they're going up against Bellator and another UFC pay-per-view. So it's another one of those odd decisions that you kind of wonder, okay, what are you guys trying to do? Who are trying to attract? And it's just a curious thing. It's probably why they fascinate me so much. I just look at them and I go, wow, look at these motherfuckers. Like, what are they trying to accomplish? I don't
Yeah,
know.
I'm not. I was thinking too. The December 13th Palhares Fitch card. That's right. That goes up against UFC on Fox 13 as well. So, uh, they have booked themselves head to head with the UFC for their only two remaining cards scheduled this year.
Uh, uh, I got bupkis. I got nothing. I don't know how you do that. I don't know how anyone
Yeah,
expects to have any sort of health in business doing something like that. That's just
yeah. I
nuts.
mean, it's one you're booking yourself up against UFC with just sort of a regional fun card that you expect fans of your organization or local fans or whatever to show up for, and it doesn't cost you any money. But if you're actually putting big names on a card that you expect to draw eyes, then going head to head with other major promotion, well, with the UFC, really is just not. That's not some way. That's not a way that they could that they can live. And like I say, I'd be kind of surprised if we actually make it to Shield or to Fitch Paul Harris. That would be sort of a momentous occasion.
Yeah, let me bring this up to you. This is a fun thing, and I want to maybe see if there's anything that you might what your thoughts are on this. But you remember when they had the whole Ali Abdelaziz had his whole mouth full where he was just shouting to all four corners of the earth that he wanted to do a World Series of Fighting versus Bellator event, and they had this whole thing where they had this dream card thought up and all that. You remember that shit, Zane Simon? Because I certainly don't think too many people do. And it's one of those things that now nobody cares about. For all the bluster, for all the talk, you know, in all the shots that they took at Bellator, and now it's like, yeah, you're kind of stinking, dude. And Uncle Coker's in charge of Bellator. I don't think too many people really feel badly about them, and that was the ammo that you were using. So, besides, you're being accused of not paying your guys right in the first place.
Yeah, well, I mean, I actually more particularly what I remember out of that was XFC releasing an XFC versus World Series of Fighting card idea that they wanted to do in
Yeah, I
response.
remember that.
And that, right now, that feels a lot more feasible.
Yeah, yeah,
I can't
actually, it
imagine
does. It
Bellator
does.
chaining themselves to this albatross right now.
No, no,
So,
absolutely not. No, you don't want that. No, you just it's like high cholesterol. Like, no, no thanks.
yeah,
Yeah,
it is sad because there was a moment. I mean, that really actually defined a moment where people were talking about that and were like, that would actually be pretty fun. It would be awesome to see that. And they still have some of that talent to do that, but nobody's asking.
yeah,
Nobody would look at that now and say, "Oh yeah, Bellator should totally get in bed with World Series of Fighting and see what they can make happen." That's not
no, no.
that could not be further from good business at the moment. So
Uh,
what they can make happen is a regional card in Canada, and as we've said, it's actually a pretty fun regional card. There are a couple of prospects on there, at least one that I can pick out. Maybe you've got more interest in a couple of these guys than I do. But and then a lot of recognizable names, former UFC, WEC, MFC fighters that people maybe aren't quite as interesting as they used to be. These are definitely not even the kind of guys that Titan FC is picking up right now. A lot of them, but some interesting guys that are
well,
at least fun to watch.
yeah, I mean, you have to hand it to them at least in this point, and it's the fact that they have plucked some really interesting talent, some really very good guys that probably aren't very well known because of how the MMA scene in Canada in general and also in Western Canada pretty much is and the state of that. But they've got some matchups that seem promising, and this really looks like it could do. I hope it delivers personally for the sake of these fighters, and I hope they do well on this one. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. So do you know anything about the bottom three fights in this card? Alves, Swanson, Kron, Baker, Mallet,
Yeah.
Dawadu. Anybody there
Oh, I
standing
got
out for you?
I got some interesting stuff to say here. Starting off at the very, very bottom, you got Roger Alves, 1-1 as a pro, 4-0 as an amateur. He trains with guys like Nick Penner and Mitch Clark, Luke Harris, who's Luke Harris is also on the card as well. Stocky wrestler. His one loss as a pro actually came to Cajun Johnson, who was on an Ultimate Fighter, what Nations or
Yeah,
whatever
a
that was called.
decade ago now. I'm just seeing
Yes,
that.
exactly. And I was just getting to that. He had a 10-year break, and now this is his first fight since what was the last Canadian card that they put on? The one that I don't think was televised here in the U.S.
Yeah.
I don't think we really touched on that. How they have like their own Canadian subsidiary of which Ryan Ford is their champion,
Yeah.
but this is like now more of like the main thing. So I don't know if that title even means anything. If it's still active, I have no clue. I don't get how that's gonna
No,
work.
it's sort of like
He beat Jesse
how
Bronfeld
Bama has
back
their
in.
British champions that nobody even realizes exist. That's basically what you've
Oh,
got with
okay.
World Series of Fighting Canada.
Huh. Well, that would make sense. Well, he did beat Alves did beat Jesse Bonfeld again in 2003. Um, Stocky wrestler seems pretty tough. I have no idea what he's gonna look like now because I didn't see his recent fight. Fighting David Swanson, 2-0, both wins by submission. 4-1 as an amateur. something really interesting about a lot of these places that these Canadian guys train at. They sound like Japanese anime names for like what they would expect an MMA gym to look like complete martial arts and fitness. Like, wow, that's quite literal. Thank you, Canada. But Swanson looks interesting because he's fighting a guy who's a hard-nosed wrestler, and he's really good with his open guard. He seems very crafty when it comes to his submission game. Very, very aggressive on top. Got some pretty weird striking with his hands, but really precise kicks. So this could be pretty good, and yeah, let's see what happens with that.
All right,
Next up, you got
Baker
Cody
Cron.
Genghis
Like,
Kron,
I mean,
of
we're
course.
not. If you have more than 2 minutes to talk
Yeah,
of stuff to say about this fight, I really don't want to hear it because it looks just like filler. I mean, let's be real here.
guys like getting into crazy dogfights, and Kron really likes going for the takedown once he's pretty much what we're going to expect from that. I don't really know what much else can happen from there, but let's hope for a good surprise and try to stay positive. That's all I
Oh,
can
of
say there.
course, of course.
Hmm.
And then Dawadu Mallet also looks like a
Yeah.
battle of interesting, maybe decent prospects, maybe not. Mallet's
Mm.
4-0, Dawadu's 2-0. Anybody
Yeah.
actually made any mark that you could dig up?
Yeah. Mike Mallet or Malat, I'm not sure what is how you pronounce it, but very interesting kid. He's got a jiu-jitsu background. He's got a Muay Thai background, as does Dawadu, but Malat seems more refined with his striking, and he's got this. There's some clips of him online where he's got one of those things that you can't really teach. When you get that guy who's got a really solid finishing instinct, he knows how to pace himself and jump in to really finish a fight. So I don't expect either of these guys to take it easy, and we should see some really fun stand-up. And I have no idea what'll happen once it hits the ground,
Uh,
but again, a lot of fun potential here.
cool. So, okay, Michael Hill's actually somebody that I've looked into recently. He's kind of considered an up and coming prospect at welterweight, which is a little weird to say again about a guy who's what I think, yeah, he's 27 now, and has been around for 4 or 5 years. But he's I believe he was on a season of The Ultimate Fighter. I'm struggling to remember which one now.
Yeah, no, that was 16. That was
Yeah,
I don't remember which one that was. I'm drawing a blank. I think that was
yeah.
the same one Cajun Johnson was on, wasn't it?
No, Cajun Johnson was
No,
on Nations, I believe. Or
I
he was
don't
on.
remember
Cajun
which
Johnson's been
that.
on like two of them, so that throws that off.
Okay,
But Michael Hill,
okay.
I believe the big notable thing about him was that he was on the winning end, I think, of what was considered one of the worst tough decisions ever. It was one of those
Really?
things
Oh
that
wow.
became infamous and like Dana White was yelling about after it happened and all that. And he is, from what I know about him, he's basically like a pretty good athlete that just found MMA late and is trying to put together a pretty strong career out of it. Doesn't really have a background in any major combat sports. um but his only losses are to Ryan Ford in a 5-round fight where he went
Yeah,
almost all 5 rounds, and a split decision to Joel Powell,
yeah.
who's just kind of another tough regional Canadian vet. So he's a guy who's putting together a pretty good record, has already knocked on the door of the UFC once, and is probably, depending on how wrapped up by World Series of Fighting he is probably on the door of another shot at potentially getting into the UFC.
Hmm. Yeah, he very well might. I mean, he's got some. His overall game doesn't seem very well put together to me, but
Yeah.
he might get an opportunity. They're especially if they keep trying to make inroads in Western Canada as it is. So yeah, and he's taking on Danny Davis Jr., who we've talked about before. We saw him on previous event, and he's one of the Drysdale and Extreme Couture guys who's not very not very notable. I mean, he's 10 and 8 as a pro. Not much of a finisher. Most of his wins are by decision, but he's on a four-fight win streak. Sorry, and his last two wins were against what, Phil Dace and Jorge Lopez. So again, not really sure how this would go if Hill doesn't really mind his P's and Q's. He could get hurt standing, but I really don't know how this would go when it hits the ground either. So that's
Yeah, I
kind
mean,
of a
it
toss-up for
seems
me.
like the sort of up and coming guy faces tough vet who is enough of a test to hopefully make him, have it be a meaningful win and kind of get him over the hump. But could easily be a setback for him.
Yeah,
Should be a competitive fight. Then we got Tim Hague, and I just saw that they've got this listed differently on Sherdog than they do on Wikipedia. They have him listed as fighting Sandy Bowman
yeah,
on
yeah, they do.
Sherdog, which is that like a late fill-in or is that?
I think it is, and I'll tell you what else. I hope it is because this is a crazy goddamn matchup. Oh my God, Master Sandy Bowman. Have you heard of this guy? Have you seen him fight?
Uh-uh.
Okay, okay. Master Sandy Bowman is actually a Taekwondo black belt who is also a Jiu-Jitsu purple belt. He's only got 3 fights as a pro under his belt. He
Beat
actually fought
Eric
Butterbean. I don't
Esch.
know if you saw. He beat Butterbean with a crazy head kick that led to punches, and then there was another one that was a solid head kick KO. I don't know, when was the last time that he actually fought? He hasn't fought in quite some time.
Yeah,
Probably
like
tending
three
to his
years.
business, but I don't know if this
2011
is.
against Butterbean.
There you go. Yeah, that's what I thought it was. I thought it was probably earlier than that, like around um, 2008 or something like that. But no, I mean he's trained under he trained under Pat Miletich for a while. He's a brown belt under Miletich's system.
Huh.
I don't
That-
really know how this happens. And you know what the other thing is? Tim Hague fought and beat a guy by the name of Dwayne Lewis, who's been up and down in the Canadian circuit. Dwayne Lewis is a student who trains at Sandy Bowman's place. So
huh.
that's like it's like you're playing 6 degrees of Canadian MMA right here. It's pretty dope.
That's a very World Series of Fighting fight at this point. Like, just
Yeah. Oh yeah.
weird to a degree that most promotions couldn't really put on. Most promotions that have any name and TV value wouldn't end up putting on.
No, you don't put on a guy who's 18-9 fighting a guy who's 3-0. What the
At
hell conviction is
43.
doing this? What the hell is doing this? This is what I don't. I mean, Tim
Yeah.
Hague. You look at his record. I mean, you look at the people that he's beat. He's beaten Ruben Villarreal. He fought Sherman Pendergast. Who's not the best record, but he was a pioneer of MMA. He submitted Pat Barry with that infamous guillotine. Zach Jensen, Travis View. He beat Lee Meehan, who again,
Yeah.
not the best record, but
I mean,
still tough guy.
Hague's a
So I
solid
mean,
regional
you're
heavyweight.
having him fight this guy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Weird fight.
and you're having him fight. I mean, he's lost to far better people than Bowman wins this. Really.
So, and then next up, we got Stephen Beaumont, who was a bit of a rising lightweight. Well, now I guess lightweight. Yeah, lightweight for the UFC or for the Canadian regional scene. Last time out, lost to Jason Sago, who is a pretty decent fighter. Is in the UFC now.
Yeah.
Just got
Yeah.
beat up by um,
Paul Felder.
Paul Felder.
The
But
Irish Dragon. Yes.
yeah,
Yes. Yes.
Sago's actually a pretty good technical fighter. One of the better for a guy who had no martial arts background before he really got into MMA. One of the better technical wrestlers and grapplers out there.
Mm-hmm.
Beaumont, has put together a pretty solid record outside of that. He's got another loss to Shane Campbell, but he looks like a decent, scrappy kind of guy. Good, solid regional up and comer, and fighting Jose Rodriguez, who I know nothing about.
Yeah. No relation, in case you're wondering, because I know that question was coming.
Oh yeah, no,
No.
I just want to know if you got like a distant cousin here fighting on the
No.
World Series
No.
fighting.
Oddly
Scene.
enough, oddly enough, I don't have too many people named Jose in my family. I don't know how the hell that happened. But yeah, Beaumont, as you mentioned, well, he trains with Alves, who's also a really tough wrestler. So that probably helps as far as his wrestling game goes. He's got 7-2 record as a pro, 3 submissions, all 3 of them chokes. Maybe it's easier for him. Maybe he's just got some sort of preference for them. You mentioned the fight that he lost to Sago, and that's not a knock. You got
No.
beat by a really tough guy. You didn't get embarrassed while fighting him, hopefully. So yeah, I mean, this is obviously going to go to the ground at some point or another. I don't know too much about Rodriguez. He's 7-3 as a pro. He trains under Troy Shear in Saskatoon. Troy Shear is a black belt under Marcus Suarez, who is well known as a black belt under Carlson Gracie. So you got that lineage going for you. Hopefully that means that it should translate pretty well to MMA, as most Carlson guys or people of the Carlson lineage do. Um, 3 TKOs and 3 submissions. I mean, he's like Charlie from Charlie's Angels. I hear a lot of talk, but I don't really see him. I don't really know what else to say about that.
Uh,
So
well,
it's gonna hit the ground, and let's hope that Beaumont can keep his submission defense up.
okay. Well, no, moving to fights then that we do know a little bit about. Luke Harris, Jared Haman. Does the
Mm.
messenger even have the mailman rather? Does the mailman even have a shot at redeeming his career on the regional circuit?
You know what, man? Look, okay. Well, Luke Harris, first off, hasn't fought since May of last year. Uh, that said, he did win over regional veteran Jason Zankraff, and he did also beat Edwin DeWeese. I think
Yeah.
that was a decision. Don't quote me on that. I don't exactly remember. Jared, though, interesting guy. I mean, he's 13-6 as a pro. He's got some really impressive wins. He beat CB Dalloway when he wasn't quite what he is now, but it was not that long ago. He beat Rodney Wallace, Travis Bew. He fought Aaron Rosa. Also, his first fight since August of last year. I believe he had didn't he tear his one of his ligaments or something in one of that last fight where he got knocked the hell out?
Yeah, I think I can't remember what happened, but he did. I believe you're right that he did get pretty badly injured.
And you look at his UFC tenure, none of his losses are anything to be ashamed of. You got Alexander Gustafsson, Cal Kingsbury, Costa Philippou in that horrific, horrific finale. Michael Kuiper, Magnus Settenblatt. I mean, there's nothing to be ashamed of here. I don't know if Luke Harris is the guy to put
Well,
him
Kuiper
away
and
necessarily.
Kingsbury are both okay fighters, but Settenblad, Philippou, Gustafsson, obviously that's all solid. I mean, but the thing is, I mean, you've seen Jared Haman fight, right?
Yes, I have,
He
unfortunately.
he
Yes.
fights like a sky guy. You know the sky guy. What I mean?
I'm not familiar with this term now.
That's the big tube flaily arm man with the fan under
Oh,
it.
oh shit! Inflatable wacky arm guy from Family Guy.
Yes,
That guy, that kind of thing.
yeah.
Oh shit!
He
Oh
he
no.
he fights like one of those,
I
and
mean, he keeps his chin out like this, like he's daring you. He's trying to adopt one of these stances here. I don't get that.
yeah,
And
he's
then he'll switch it to some other odd stance.
so even if a lot of his losses are totally legit, and even if he scored a couple of big upset wins, I don't know. Like he has a style that is basically just built to have. He's sort of like the modern day Gary Goodrich. He's just not fighting as often,
Ooh,
and
wow.
I wonder how even if you step back, like Luke Harris is actually a pretty good judoka. A solid skilled
Mm.
athlete. He's not young, but he's got very definitive skills, and I'm just not sure beyond relentless aggression what Jared Haman can really bring out there anymore.
No, he's gonna want to counter strike. He's gonna want to counter strike, and it's not gonna really. I don't think that's really gonna happen like that.
Yeah, it's
Hmm.
definitely one of those
I don't
times.
know, man. You can only go so you can only get ahead so far by Homer Simpsoning your way and just absorbing a shitload of damage.
Yeah,
I don't really. I hope he doesn't take that approach. Hope that maybe he'd clean it up and hopefully this won't look like a goddamn execution. But eh, what can you do?
yeah. I
It's a
I
big
do
question
I
mark.
worry about that for the messenger because it's hard not to have a soft spot for guys that fight like that, but It's also hard eventually to expect them to win.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Speaking of guys who, well, Hordeski's definitely a more technical fighter, but so Chris Hordeski is on the card as well. He's fighting up and comer Luis Huete, um,
Mm-hmm.
who took a 3 or 5 year break right in the middle of his career, actually, but has come back and looked
Mm-hmm.
pretty good lately. Hordeski's one of those guys who is much better, I think. Like you look at his record, and it's much, much better than you would think, with that image of Anthony and Njokuani versus Hordeski forever burned in your mind.
Yeah, well, I mean, didn't oh no, I'm thinking of Eve Edwards did the same thing to Josh Thompson. So it's one of those things where like, yeah, that was bad, but that's like a 3 second clip of something that's not indicative of a guy's career. And when you look at the guys that he's beat, I mean, shit, I mean, Ed West's in Bellator now, Ryan Schultz, Bart Palashevsky, Ed Ratcliffe, Chris Saunders in Bellator, so he's fought some really tough guys who have been pretty well rounded and skilled. And, even the people that he's lost to, Anjaquani, as you mentioned, Cerrone, Mike Richmond in Bellator. He lost to Marlon Sanjo in his last bout in Bellator. So it's like,
Yeah,
I don't
there's
really
nothing to
think
be
that,
ashamed of there at all.
no. But
But
it
the
takes
only
a certain
thing,
kind of guy to beat him. Like you have to be at
yeah,
a certain level, And with his, he's 6-1 as a pro, 5 submissions, and his last fight was a knockout win. He's got a tendency of backing straight up, which I don't like. So maybe Haradeski exploits that. I don't know. You have to be at a certain point to beat Chris, I guess is what I'm
yeah, Huete gets hit hard a lot.
saying.
Like
Yeah.
a lot. That the guy he fought last time, Wolfgang
Yeah.
Jensen, I think was his name. It looked, I mean, it was like a mini Canadian Leonard Garcia, and
Mm.
Huete just
Okay.
sort of went strike for strike with him and won eventually, but he almost got knocked out a couple times. I definitely think this is one of those cases where you get a young guy who's trying to, or maybe even not that young. Like I say, he took 5 years off. I have no idea how old he is.
Mm.
Um, but a guy who's trying to build a decent career and is probably going to meet a much craftier, solid vet who can just grind away at him over 3 rounds.
That's odd that there's no age displayed for a guy who's got 7 pro fights. I don't understand how that happens.
It's all
Maybe
regional
maybe
stuff.
he's a yeah, maybe he's part vampire. Who knows? That ought to be
There
fun.
you go. The ever living Chris Huete or Luis Huete.
Uh,
So,
it's
now,
funny. It's funny you should mention that because I was gonna wear my Mum Ra shirt, Mum Ra the Ever Living. So there you go. Now you. I'm
so
sorry. Keep going.
okay, now I gotta ask you, since we're getting into this
Yeah.
fight, we got Smelian Harama versus Derek Memon. Can you actually get excited for Smelian Harama? Is that like a thing that you're
I
capable of?
for the purely morbid curiosity of seeing what's going to happen and how he's going to deal with eating punches from a guy who hits like a goddamn Mack truck and Derek Manman, yes. Yes, I can. Not if he was fighting anybody else, like if he were fighting, I don't know, Sandy Bowman, I'd be like, that's a
Well,
thing
what I
that's
mean is
happening.
like, he's 22,
Yeah,
he's a heavyweight.
yeah.
Do you look at Smelian Harama and go, "Oh yeah, there's a future like elite heavyweight
Yeah, no,
in the making"?
I don't look. No disrespect to him, but I don't see anything here, any kind of noise that he made that's made me go, "Oh, hang on, my panties are slipping off. Oh, how'd that happen?" Like I don't, it's just not happening right now with him. I got to see a little more and just a little better to really be excited about that, and I just don't really see it. I'm more excited for the fact that he's fighting Derek Manman and the highlight reel that he's put together than I actually really care to see him fight right now. And again, not an
Yeah,
indictment on him as a fighter, just
I mean, I do think he beats Derek Memon. Honestly, I don't. I mean, Derek Memon's best win to date is Hall's Gracie, and
yeah,
that's really only
yeah.
because we
Now
all got to see the flare
he did
flop.
knock out Dave.
Did who?
No, I'm sorry. I was going to say that he did also knock out Dave Huckabee in their last fight, which
But he didn't.
not as impressive. Not,
That
you
was a
know, it
3-round decision.
wasn't. Oh, I'm sorry. No, oh, I'm thinking of someone else. Oh, shit. I'm sorry. No, yeah, I'm wrong about that. Okay, well then, no, never mind. Yeah, seeing Hollis Gracie do the Ric Flair flop there, that was pretty much the most memorable thing that we've seen him do, which,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But then he's got what, like 11 knockouts in 18 wins. So,
They were
I mean,
they were all in his early fights though. Like it
mm,
was at the very beginning when he was fighting poor competition. He was knocking dudes out left and
mm,
right. He hasn't his only knockouts lately are somebody named John Reed and Halls Gracie.
mm. Oh well,
Otherwise, yeah,
yeah.
John Reed's 0-4. So
Mm.
I don't think Memon's actually winning this fight. Um, Rama does have at least a modicum of talent. I'm just not especially like I have yet to see anything really from him that makes me think, oh, Emiliano Rama is going to be a badass.
No, I certainly know that feeling. It's not like he's not necessarily doing anything wrong. It's just there's nothing really that major. And again, maybe it's the lack of exposure or the fact that the Canadian scene is where it's at, and that it's been that way for the last year and a half or however long it's been. I mean, his only loss is to Anthony Hamilton. And he's beat a couple of guys. He beat Anthony. I'm sorry. He beat Lee Meehan. He beat Steve Mocco, and he also beat Tim Hague. But
Yeah,
still, is that enough for you to say, well, this is going to be, he's fought a tough wrestler at least in Steve Mocco. I don't know where
yeah,
that really necessarily puts him. Should he be
yeah.
fighting for a
Mako is one of
title?
those guys I think that people had higher hopes for than they had actual like realistic expectations. You know.
Yeah, no, I know I did. I certainly did, and I really wanted him to do well. Yeah,
But I don't know that necessarily like that doesn't
yeah.
the expectations of what Steve Mako could do were probably like watching him actually fight. There was not a lot going on there.
You know what? Also, I just realized at this point. Hmm.
What?
Hello? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I thought you were still. I thought you cut out for a second. I just realized something. The name of the event, World Series of Fighting 14, U.S. versus Canada. This whole card is Canadians fighting Canadians up until this fight. It's only the main event and the co-main event that actually have Americans in it. So it doesn't mean what you think it means, World Series of Fighting. No, and your website is still strange. Ugh,
Jared
I don't know.
Haman's American. I mean, I know he
Oh no, you
has
know what? Yeah, you're
the
right. I'm
demeanor
sorry.
of a
You're right.
Canadian, but
No, no.
it's mostly Canadians versus Americans. No, it is.
Yeah.
Danny Davis
Uh,
Jr., Sandy Bowman. No,
oh
Sandy
shit,
Bowman's
wait.
Canadian.
No,
That's
how did I ignore that? Danny Davis, of course. We just talked about him. Never mind.
yeah.
Never mind.
So, but you're right. It's as much
I need
Canadians
my
fighting
coffee.
Canadians as it is Canadians fighting Americans. It's Canada versus Canada and also America.
Yeah, hey, we hate everyone else and sometimes ourselves. Well,
All
oh boy.
right. So finally, the main event, the true Canada versus America. Jake Shields, Ryan Ford. Is Ryan Ford a top 20 welterweight?
How does that happen?
How does what happen?
Well, how does a guy who weighs 400 pounds and smoked crack end up being a top welterweight? I mean, he's busy being the mayor of Toronto. How did that? Oh shit! Wait, I'm
We're
sorry.
Victor
I hate
Rodriguez is
myself. I
officially
hate myself
fired.
just a little. I hate myself just a little for doing that, but not too much. I'm sorry. You're a man of refined taste, Zane Simon. I knew that was a little too low, bro. I shouldn't have done it. I don't have the fancy monocle eating couscous with two spoons like you, but hey, what are you gonna do? Ryan Ford, top 20? Really? I
Is
mean,
he?
I can see it. I can see it. If that were the case, it's a very stacked division. Um, I don't know. Is he a top 20? I mean, shit.
I
He got a lot of tough ones in UFC and Bellator.
I mean, Yeah, I don't think like. Do you see that? Do you think he has the raw talent for it? I don't. I mean, or like the talent for it. I don't know that he does, honestly. I mean, he's good. He's obviously a very good athlete and a very
Yes.
good fighter.
Yes,
But
yes, he is, and I don't know how far it gets him as far as being top 20 though. He
yeah,
trains at a world-class camp, and he's got a very solid record training with guys at TriStar who, I mean, apparently from what I understand, he doesn't just train with some high-level guys there, he hangs with them.
yeah,
So if you can keep up and you're doing something like that, you're obviously very, very good. Top 20, that's a complicated. I mean, shit, it's such a deep division, man. I don't know. I don't know if he's top 20.
because if he's not, he doesn't beat Jake Shields. That's
Mm, Well,
that's
even if he is, I mean, he only loses to certain guys. I mean, earlier in his career, he lost to certain guys that you go, wow, that happened, wow. But then after that, his UFC losses were what? GSP. He got knocked the fuck out by Ellenberger. What was that? 2 weeks or something or less after his
yeah.
dad died. And then the absolute clinic that Hector Lombard put on him. I don't know. He had that loss against Akira Kikuchi way back in the day, who think he also I think he also beat. Um, I don't know. I don't know where that really. I don't think Jake Shields has declined to that point. His stand-up, obviously, it's been immortalized in Bloody Elbow and the three words that make my heart sing: "Bap, bap, bap."
Yeah, yeah.
And as someone noted, he's the only guy to lose the standing or striking portion of Bully Beatdown. I'll let you make of that what you will, but that it was a long time ago. Hey, these things happen, but shit. I don't know if Ryan Ford's the guy to make him pay for his mistakes.
Yeah, I mean Ryan Ford's obviously a pretty elite athlete. I think, you watch footage of him. He's obviously at an athletically higher level than most guys he'll ever fight. And but I mean, one of the other things that watching him too is going back and watching like his fight against Kyle Baker in Bellator, and
Mm-hmm.
you know he has a ton of power and he has a ton of athleticism, but he doesn't apply his technique with the kind of consistency that's just automatically going to wreck guys. Like he can hurt somebody, but following up on that is a bit hard. Like he reminds me a bit of oh, damn it, who's the bantamweight that knocked out George Roop? Not
Oh wow. Yeah. Well, I mean, I can see that comparison. I mean, well, you look at Ryan Ford's
Francisco
loss to.
Rodriguez. Reminds me a bit of
Okay.
Francisco Rodriguez or
Okay.
Rivera.
Okay.
Rivera, Francisco Rivera. There we go.
Francisco
Rodriguez,
Rivera.
Rivera.
Okay.
It's all the same. You
Yeah.
guys, you
Wait, no,
guys
I'm like,
know
yeah,
that.
Francisco Rodriguez. No, yeah. Well, I mean, all Hispanic people, we all know each other, but
Yeah.
it's a Hispanic thing. I'll teach you later. Don't worry about that. Let's sweep that
Okay.
under the
Thank
rug. But no, Rodriguez. I think there's a Mexican fighter with that name. I think.
you. Probably,
Yeah, probably.
but
But no, I mean,
Francisco
the thing with
Rivera.
Ford is, I mean, yeah. Well, the deal with Ford is that he's the guys that he's lost to. There's no shame in losing these guys. I mean, to at least most of them. He's lost to Pat Healy twice. He lost to Doug Lima. I mean, you don't really. That's not bad at all. But
No.
again, is it enough to take on a guy? Has he fought a guy like Jake Shields? He beat Luis Santos in Bellator. He ended up beating Michael Hill at one point earlier in his career. Kara Parisian, sort of. I don't really count that as a win because I still feel he was losing that fight. It was a doctor stoppage after he hit Caro with a knee that busted him open, and he was just bleeding too much. The doctor stopped it in the third. And he beat Speed Pratt. Speed Pratt. Oh my God, what? Pete Spratt. I don't know what the fuck is going on with me today. Twice. So I mean, he's fought some good guys. He's fought good opposition among some not so great opposition, not so notable opposition. But I don't think he's ever fought a guy like Jake Shields, and I don't think he's gonna. I don't know how he's going to deal with that kind of top pressure and relentless submission attack against a guy like
Yeah. If Shields loses this fight, it's a sign that he's hit that sort of Yushin Okami patch where you looked at him getting cut, and you're like, really? They cut him, and then suddenly he goes out and, um, well, actually, I guess it's John Fitch that I'm thinking of, not Yushino Kami. Yushino
Yeah.
Kami actually won his next fight out.
Yes. Yes, he
He's
did.
if he loses here, he'll have hit that John Fitch patch where you can't believe that he got cut when he did, and then he goes right out and sort of reinforces the idea by losing to somebody that you expect him to beat 9 times out of 10.
Yeah, and not even that. It's the fact that, well, I mean, the situation with Fitch, Berkman being a tougher guy who perhaps was being overlooked. He had improved greatly since he was more um, heralded and everything, but it's also the way he lost. So I guess it also depends on how Shields loses, right?
Yeah.
Or, I mean, if it's a quick finish, then you really go, okay, you're in that weird sort of wasteland, I guess, of
Or well, if
you're in a very
if Ford beats him the way Hector Lombard did, just tosses him
mm,
around. I mean,
uh, I don't know if he's got that kind of pedigree to do that. I mean, certainly in the
no,
striking department, Ford's a lot more polished, but
no, but I mean, like he's a much, he is a much better athlete from like a raw, explosive power department than Shields is.
yeah,
So, it is
yeah,
an
no,
interesting
I
fight.
totally agree with. I totally agree with you on that, and it is interesting for that, and also the fact that what happens if Ford wins? He can't leave Canada.
No,
What's going to
yeah,
happen then? You're going to have to hold more events in Canada for the sake of keeping your champion busy, which they don't do a good job of doing so far. So what's
no,
going to happen then?
yeah, that Ryan Ford is he sort of really typifies World Series of Fighting right now at this moment of being a talented fighter who is shackled to them through circumstance. Like, nobody else is going to be giving Ryan Ford fights. Like, what's he going to do if he leaves World Series of Fighting? Nobody. It's back to the most regional promotions in Canada because nobody else is going up there often enough or putting on enough shows to keep him busy.
That is very strange because even the UFC, I mean, they go to Canada not, I don't want to say regularly, but probably more than any other multinational promotion. Definitely, at least I'd say. I mean,
Yeah,
probably more than Bellator at this point, and
yeah,
I don't know. I don't know how that would work. Maybe go back to Bellator, but even they're not doing the week to week to week thing where they'd have frequent locales. So where would they even have him? I don't know where he would go from there. If he loses, that doesn't mean he's gone from World Series of Fighting necessarily. But if he were not in World Series of Fighting, I don't know what other organization would take him and how that would work outside
yeah.
of a local or just a strictly Canadian promotion, which he seems to be quite content with.
Yeah, well, I mean, he kind of has to be. I honestly don't think the UFC can hire him at this point, with the
Mm.
bad press that they've generated out of some of the guys they've hired. I mean, it's been a long time, but when you've committed a felony bad enough that you can't leave your own country, it's
Mm.
hard for a major promotion to justify.
How about a felony that's bad enough that you can't leave Canada? I mean, I thought they were strict about motherfuckers getting in, not people leaving. I didn't know how that was a thing. But I mean, not just that, but I think maybe, just maybe, if he were doing kind of like what Josh Thompson has been doing for years, where he visits troubled youth in detention centers and high schools, and he kind of teaches them, look, I was messed up, but I turned myself around through martial arts, and you can fix it too. There's more
Oh
to
yeah,
this. If Ford had been doing something like that, maybe, and I don't mean that he needs to do it cynically for public relations. I really wouldn't want him to do that. But if he were doing something like that on the regular, and just by chance a film crew were wondering, and yeah, I've been doing this, off camera for a while now, that would certainly get him in the good graces with a lot of people, and maybe might ease the process for him to move on to the UFC. Maybe, maybe.
yeah. I mean,
Um,
that's always the big thing with that kind of thing is really just like how much time
yeah,
is
yeah.
is somebody spending, um speaking out publicly against what they did in the past. That's kind of the big marker for me is just like, and with Ford, it is one of those things like you can't really take someone hostage in their own home and assault them and threaten to cut off body parts and
Yeah.
then go on and like you know be a big public head of an organization.
No, and I mean, we talked about the very first one of these that we did. We talked about this, and I mean, I still stick with the position. I don't necessarily. We should not forget. But if someone's making at least the positive strides, as he has, you might think that maybe he should do. If I think maybe he could do a little more from a public image perspective, or at least maybe he is, and we just don't know. But he does seem like he's made the strides to get his shit together, and I don't
Oh yeah.
really think TriStar's not really like the kind of place where they would kind of let that sort of thing
I,
go
I don't
if he had
I
been,
honestly don't doubt that he's turned his life around and may be a totally
yeah,
decent person. This isn't one of those things where it's like a doubting of that. It's just from
yeah.
purely from a public standpoint, public relations standpoint, you can't like that's such a huge burden you've placed on yourself to try to overcome. Like it's one thing if you're
Yeah.
like, I was young and stupid. Like, Alexander Gustafsson's got like that. I was young and stupid, and I
Yeah.
got in some fights, and he like threw a woman off a pier and
Oh,
got in some
wow.
fights with with other young guys and shit like that. And it's not good, but it's also the kind of thing that you can mark up as like teenager does stupid shit. But
Hmm. I, I didn't know. I knew that Gustafsson had some legal trouble that he does not like to talk about. I didn't know there was a woman involved in any of this. That's
he
yeah.
was like beating up some chick's boyfriend, and she tried to stop him, and he like threw her into a lake,
Oh, Jesus.
as well as I mean,
Well,
like, yeah, and he
I
was
mean,
like 17.
yeah, but I mean, also, he's from Sweden. Maybe courtship rituals are different over there.
Yeah, well,
maybe no. I don't know. I don't know.
anyway, that's unfortunately kind of the sour note at which this whole World Series of Fighting breakdown ends. Is the idea of what do you do with Ryan Ford if he beats Jake Shields? Where does he go from here, especially in a promotion that probably isn't going to be around that much longer? Like that's a hell of a huge win. It's
Yeah.
He would
Well,
announce
it
himself
raises.
as a potentially top 20 welterweight in the world if he won
I
that
think
fight.
yeah. Now, forget potentially. I think it definitely would solidify him as a top 20. I just don't know it certainly raises his stock. I just don't know what else happens from there, man. That's such an odd thing to happen. But
Now, if Bellator could put on enough shows to get him to fight Paul Daly, how would you not pay for
mm,
that?
oh my goodness, I would pay so much money for that. I would, well, okay, maybe not too much, but I would pay. I would pay solid money. And yeah, I mean, you know what? Even if they're planning on doing this, we didn't get to mention this, but Ray Sefo mentioned that World Series of Fighting wants to do a pay-per-view in next year,
Yeah, well, at this
probably around the
point,
midpoint, and they want to split the profits with the fighters and all that other stuff. And I mean, okay, well, Ryan Ford would be one of your bigger stars, and you can't have him on. I mean, I don't know. It just if that's even something that would happen.
yeah, at this point, that's so far in the future that it's just kind of like, it seems like a pipe dream. It seems like a total pipe dream, and I can't even give it real lip service. I mean, from what I've heard, Josh Berkman was, he was talking about being on that pay per view like 2 weeks ago. You know, that was
Hmm.
one of the things he was looking at, and now he's in the UFC. And you can't be looking at a promotion thinking about like,
Oh my
oh yeah, let's
God.
stack our pay per view with this fighter, and then 2 weeks later he's signed for, from your organization like that. No, the negotiations he would have to get into the UFC would have broken like his contract law. Like you can't. He's under contract. He doesn't have an out clause. He can't be negotiating with other people during that contract. Like that's
I don't, I don't
so
know. I don't know how that happened.
how
That's
that
just
happened.
so crazy.
There's no way in which that could have happened that looks good for World Series of Fighting. This idea, like, oh, we got an offer too good from the UFC, and we just couldn't refuse. We just couldn't let him not take it. It's like
Uh,
that. That is
well,
that's such a
no, hang on.
lovely story.
Hang on. What if they offered him guarantees to be on a pay-per-view or two per year? not necessarily getting points, but just
No,
sort
no,
of
I'm
getting
not
that.
saying the
I don't
UFC
know.
couldn't have made him a great offer, but they couldn't have made him any offer legally. So
Oh no, yeah, no. From that point, that is very sketchy. No, and I'm still racking my brain. I mean, obviously, I'm not a legal expert, but just the same way that I don't need to be a doctor to know that drinking a gallon of bleach is fucking horrible for you. I have a bit of an idea how certain things work when it comes to contracts, and that does seem very, very sketchy here. Unless there's a very good explanation, I don't know how the hell that happened. That's
yeah,
really, really weird. Yeah, yeah. I
painting it
thought he
as
was
he
all
got
locked
an
up.
offer
Well,
too good to
yeah,
refuse just seems
yeah.
like you're missing a major leap of faith that has to be taken for that story to be true.
No, I'm just imagining Lorenzo Fertitta with his massive biceps, just putting Ali Abdelaziz in a headlock and just making him say "uncle" and then just handing over the contract to Berkman. That's the only way that I see that happening. There's no
Yeah,
other. Yeah.
it's got to be something pretty similar to that.
Mm,
So
yeah.
anyway, World Series of Fighting 14
Anyway.
should be interesting. One way or another, we are going to learn something about Jake Shields and Ryan Ford. Um, it may be that Shields can still hang around and be a sort of stopping point, a capping point for welterweights in the world. Or it's that Ryan Ford is a super legit talent that we should be paying a lot more attention to, and that his career is going to be undergoing changes that we can't predict. So that's a good enough reason to watch. You got anything else? Any other reasons that you're excited about this? That's really the big one for me.
Yeah, you gonna be watching anything else, motherfucker? This is all there is. They finally picked a week where there's no UFC or anything else on that weekend or a major boxing card. So, it's a fun card. It seems like it'll deliver, and there's not much else going on. So yeah, give it a watch, man. I know I'll be watching, and probably some money to be made if you're putting money down on it. So hey, check it out.
All right. Well, I you you should follow like this video if you watched it, because honestly, that's really where I get all of my that's where I get all my self worth out of YouTube likes. That's the thumbs up at the bottom of the screen. Nate would, he demands my head if I don't clearly explain that to people. And if you want to follow us on Twitter at @TheZaneSimon. You can find Victor at Vic M Rodriguez if you want to find him. And remember to follow MMANation.com to get more updates and all that crap. And we'll see you next week, or see you soon for more content. I got a Bellator video to talk about. We got other stuff coming. Thanks for joining in.
Yay.